Chapter 25. The starting line was very close. Master Lee lifted his left hand, and the white tip of the green silk scarf snapped back, and the great twisted figure of bounding and rushing extended his cloth-wrapped sticks over the taut surface of the huge timpan atop the center platform and began a quiet, steady drum roll. Across the rainbow water, male elder was doing the same in the yang boat. 176 oars slid out on the four sides of the two boats and hovered above the surface. A dark, straight shadow touched the tips of the horns that extended straight out from the dragonhead prows and slid backward to touch the pilot posts against which the captains braced themselves. And Envy and Master Lee flicked out their right scarves. Gliding, sliding one raised his clapping boards and made a sharp, crashing noise, as did Elder Extraordinary One across from us, and each team of 88 oars dipped into the water with long, smooth strokes. The boat seemed to jump forward beneath my feet. The clapping boards and drum worked steadily and unhurriedly as they set the beat. Crash, rat-tat-tat, crash, rat-tat-tat, crash. Steering oars as big as the ones on racing boats produce a terrible drag once they hit the water, like brakes on wagon wheels, and the steersman spends half his time sailing through the air with his body stretched out over the handle, trying to keep the huge key-shaped blade just above the surface of the water, but not touching it. When the scarves signal a turn or a drift must be corrected, the goat earns his pay. Down! Shove! Up! The tiniest extension of steering time means that much extra drag. Fractions of a second at the start can add up to an equal number of feet at the end, and the strange, supernatural girl across from me was controlling her great oar with a touch of a finger. I was already fighting mine, and I knew there was no chance of matching a well-spirit who lived in complete harmony with immortal cavaliers and ancient demigods and water woven from music. I could only do my best and trust in Master Lee. Bounding and rushing continued the stroke beat with his drum, but gliding, sliding one was giving a different sound with his clapping boards. At first I couldn't make it out. Then I saw the long, flowing end of Master Lee's left scarf flick up and down, and at almost the same time the oars bucked up against me, and I realized the clapping boards from now on would transmit warnings and commands. This was no placid pool we were riding on. The clapping boards were describing waves, and we lifted high and swooped down, and as we lifted again the drum beats on both boats stepped up a notch, and the oar strokes quickened. I saw the right scarf wave an instant before the clapping boards repeated the command. Wait, wait, now! I dropped the blade into the water and leaned left. 1, 2, 3, up! Getting it up smoothly wasn't so easy, but I managed, with nothing more serious than a bloody nose, when the handle kicked me in the face. Wait, wait, down! Lean right. 1, 2, 3, up! It wasn't pretty, but we made a turn and were back on course again. I stared at the great black rock that both boats had veered around, thrusting through rainbow waters. It had sun and moon symbols engraved on it, yang and yin, and I wondered if it had something to do with the Namon nature of the course, like a measuring mark. Master Lee signaled, and the clapping boards repeated the command, and the smooth, powerful strokes of the lead oarsman stretched out a notch. Boom, rat-tat-tat, boom, rat-tat-tat. Boom, rat-tat-tat. Across from us, Envy had given the same command at precisely the same time, and the boats were dead even. The captain is the most important member, of course. The goat is so far back he can't possibly see the hazards ahead, and the world of rowers begins and ends with their oars, and the drummer's job is to inspire, regulate, and transmit, not to originate. The captain must serve as eyes and brain from the pilot's post in the prow, and one wrong message from a flapping scarf can mean the end of the race. My faith in Master Lee is limitless, but I had to admit that his situation was something like mine. Across from him was a cavalier who had dared to love and betray the most powerful and dangerous of all goddesses, and who had once run this very race against 8 skilled gentlemen, and who had even driven a team of plunging dragons along a path between the stars, or something almost as dramatic if one allows for poetic exaggeration. The puppeteer didn't seem to have a care in the world, as he easily shifted his body with the movements of the boat, not bothering to brace against his pilot's post. Boom, rat-tat-tat, boom, rat-tat-tat, boom, rat-tat-tat. Now the boats were fighting the waves, bucking up and down, and I was learning the first reason for the goat's name. On a rough course, the steersman must swing his oar to provide the best balance for the boat, using wind drag to correct drift as much as possible, without resorting to the much greater water drag of conventional steering. Half the time I was flying through the air, butting everything in sight as I wrestled with that huge, heavy thing, and when I looked through the spray to my left, I could see Quan controlling her oar with no more than a shove and a tug. How could she do it? Strength wasn't entirely the answer. Somehow she was anticipating each wave and chop of water, each plunge and bounce of the boat, and was already in position when the instant for correction came. All around us the vibrations of the U-music was growing stronger and stronger. The cavern seemed to have disappeared. The sky, was it really a sky? Had grown very dark, and the rainbows woven through the waves were shimmering like fire. I thought I saw banks on both sides, with trees and tangled shrubs, and then I saw people on the right bank, and great terrible creatures on the left. The scarves signaled, and the drums quickened, and the 8 lead oars on each boat picked up the pace. The boats were shooting ahead like skimming arrows, spray flying up as prows smacked short, choppy waves. The clapping boards called urgently, "Wait, wait, down, shove, up, wait, wait, down, shove, up." We safely veered around a second jutting solstice-marked stone, but this time I was a fraction too late in lifting. I doubt that anyone else would have noticed the tiny jump ahead that the Yang boat took when Quan managed the turn perfectly, but I did. She was several inches in front of me now, and if those thrusting rocks were Naumann measures, there should be 4 more of them, half a year, and I didn't want to think how far she'd be leading when we passed the last one. Scarves flicked and clapping boards urged and drums picked up the pace. Oars flashed faster and faster. Boom, rat-tat-tat, boom, rat-tat-tat. But I was having a terrible time concentrating on my oar. On my left I could see a bank where huge, horrible creatures roared and fought and killed, and flames and lava poured from volcanoes, and terrible cracks appeared in the earth as the ground heaved and shook. On my right I could see men and women crouched and fearful, dressed in furs, and priests wearing bearskins with 4 gold eyes sewn on them, who raised arms to heaven and prayed. And a girl was thrust forward and a stone axe lifted, and just as I had seen the celestial master, the axe fell, and a soul was offered to the gods. Wait, wait, down, shove, up! Wait, wait, down, shove, up! The Yang boat was leading by a foot now. The jutting rock flashed past, and as it did, I saw people staring up in fear at a tiny pale sun, like a fading candle, and they shoved children out from under the shelter of caves and had them run around and play with special caps on their heads, just as we still did in my village during the first moon. Bright-colored caps shaped like flowers and grasshoppers, vivid against white snow to catch the eyes of gods looking down. Fires were put out to save all heat for the sun. Hard-cooked eggs, dyed as bright and cheerful as the flowers of spring, were brought out beneath the dark, cold sky, and the shells were ceremoniously cracked, and the round yellow yolks removed and held up high. Faster the scarves and clapping boards signaled, and faster flashed the oars, and the boats bounced over waves with teeth-jarring impact, one right after another, and the stern swung around as the slim hulls tried to go sideways. I flipped like a rag doll tied to the handle of the steering oar, trying to use air drag as much as possible and water drag as little. But still Quan was always ahead of me, always anticipating, always balanced and calm and sure. The Yang boat's lead was more than a yard now. Through sheets of spray I could see blurred images on the banks. There was a tiny village, very much like my own, and with a pang in my heart I saw the beautiful girls wearing their brightest clothes, being pushed in swings by the young men, higher and higher, lovely flowers reaching to the sky, and the older women in equally bright dress, holding bright ribbons as they danced like petals around a stalk-like pole. Fathers urged sons to keep the shuttlecocks in the air longer and longer, and each shuttlecock was painted bright yellow like the sun. The last ice was ceremoniously cracked, and the graves were swept, and the spirits of the dead were invited to join the festival of the first bath in the stream, where wine in buoyant cups floated from hand to hand. I had lost track of gnomon markers. The U vibrations were tremendously strong, and suddenly I realized how the spirit of old Wells could anticipate every command. Kwan wasn't watching the water. She was listening to the sounds that formed it, and I discovered that if I stopped thinking and let my body react to the music of the U, I was already in place when the scarf and clapping boards reached me. But it was too late. Already the gap had spread to 10 feet. It was going to get worse unless Envy gave a bad command. I could only see his back now, far ahead, glimpsed momentarily through spray, and even at that distance he exuded the calm control of a gentleman out for a holiday paddle on a pool. Master Li was doing the only thing he could, which was to pray. I could see him straight ahead on the high raised prow with his head lifted to the sky, and scattered words drifted back on the wind. Lady of mysteries, guide of lost souls, blender of the hot and cold, the wet and the dry, the done and the undone. The right hand lifted and the long scarf flicked out a command. But I had already heard something in the vibrating music, something ahead, and I was ready now. Down, shove, up, wait, down, shove, up. I could have swept in frustration. This time Kwan didn't gain on me, and we made the turn around the rock in unison. But too late. Still the 10-foot gap remained. Lady of highest prime, guardian of the greatest sacrifice, solace of all that sickens and dies. We had flashed past a rock into searing sunlight that made the sky appear to be on fire. Black-funneled waterspouts lifted from frothy rainbow waves, and I saw a dragon rear up through the surface, one of the terrible ones, a Kiaolong, as opposed to the beneficial water dragons. Horrible creatures had claimed the left bank. On the right bank, an unrelenting yellow wind was ripping cottages apart, and sand covered everything, and all the crops were burned and withered. Lady who grieves, lady who comforts, lady who guards all living things, chanted Master Li. Screams overhead made me look up to see the most terrifying of all creatures, the 3-winged servants of the patron of pestilence, who had once allowed a cavalier to love her, the Queen Mother Goddess of the West. Those who know the lady would say that her claws had touched the cavalier but lightly. Now from the mountain of the 3 dangers had come the great pelican bearing upon its back the pestilential hag, Yu Hua Lung, and the small pelican that carried Tao Shen Yang Yang, the plague queen, and the green bird that carried Ma Shen, patron of pustules and pockmarks. The 3 death birds swooped low, screeching, and for one heart-stopping moment I thought I saw an immense tiger claw rip through the sky from horizon to horizon. But then I realized it was a claw of yellow wind. The scarf was signaling, and the clapping board sounded. Down, shove, up, wait, down, shove, up, and both boats made the turn evenly, with the Yang boat still leading by 10 feet, and my liver turned cold. That last rock was marked with Yang symbols from one end to the other. It was the last gnomon marker, half a year, and the strength of Yang must now give way to Yin if the earth wasn't to burn and plague and pestilence run rampant. As our boat had swung wide, I had been able to look ahead. I'd seen a white streak of sunlight cutting straight across the path of the music water, and the course narrowed as it approached the finish line, and squarely in the center, suspended in air, hung a shimmering ring. It was Pi, symbol of the harmony of heaven, seamless, continual circle of Yang and Yin, and the tips of the two long, slim dragon horns, thrusting from the prows, began to grow with the same shimmering light. Master Lee and Envy flung both scarves wide, and drums and clapping boards pounded like giant heartbeats, and the rowers made great gasping sounds as they put every ounce of strength into their strokes. Lady of Solace, Lady of Purging, whatever goddess Master Lee had in mind, had better hurry, I thought, because the rowers on the Yang boat were equally strong, and the gap was getting no shorter. I was flying around, trying to achieve perfect balance with the oar as the boat bucked and bounced and skidded over great waves, and when the water boiled between our boat and Envy's, and something lifted from the depths, I was too busy to really see it at first. Then I did see it, and in a flash I understood that Master Lee had not been praying to a goddess at all. Right from the start, he had been invoking a priestess, a healer, a shamanka, and lifting through the rainbow water was the head of Yulan. The puppeteer's beautiful daughter looked at me for a long moment. Her lips parted, and I saw the glitter of fangs, and one of her claws lifted through spray and fell back. 2 of the drops that trickled slowly down her face weren't music water. Then she dove. Yulan disappeared beneath the waves, and I was never to see her face again. But I did see something else. Ahead of us and to the left, the water boiled in front of the Yang boat, and then a great shining fishtail lifted into the air. Harsh sunlight blazed on the scales, and it whipped around with tremendous force and smacked squarely against the prow. For an instant the Yang boat paused, as though tied to a leash that somebody had jerked, and when it moved forward again, the gap had gone. We were dead even. Or perhaps we even had a bit of an edge, in that the smooth strokes of our oarsmen hadn't been disrupted, and Master Lee began to roar like a volcano. "On, Farstua! On, ancestral intelligence! On, lungs and stomach! How, how! Rising and soaring! Seizer of all! Sharpener and amputator! On, lusty, husky, lusty one! On, extreme and extraordinary one! How, how, how!" Bounding and rushing pounded his drum with all the force he had, and gliding, sliding ones smashed his clapping boards, and the rowers strained to match the strokes of the lead oars. Here's Master Lee's right hand was out, and I waited for the scarf to uncoil and shoot back. It came. Down, shove, hold steady, aim, lift just above the surface and wait for the scarf. Down, hard left, up, down, soft right, up. We had a slight lead, and it cut across the path of the Yang boat. Oars scraping oars, wood screeching against wood. The long, slim, glowing horn from the prow of our boat was reaching out, and then it plunged through, and the shimmering P-ring was snugly around the tip. In an instant the finish line had vanished, and the banks had vanished, and the rowers leaned back and hauled in their oars, and 2 great dragon boats floated side by side in a soft mist. Master Lee turned slowly to the puppeteer. Envy turned at the same time, and they examined each other for a moment, and then, at a cost beyond my comprehension, the glorious sunrise smile lit up the garish ape face. Poetic justice is a bit too neat for my taste, but I have to admire its effectiveness, Envy said. I realized that his boat was turning transparent, and so was the crew, fading into the mist. Only the puppeteer remained as before, and he bent low, and came up with the last cage he had taken. "There's a way to get the key without releasing the creature inside, you know," he said matter-of-factly. "It's time for you to meet the last of my brothers, but have no fear. It would be a poor cavalier who accepted the challenge and resorted to murder when he lost." He did something with his left hand, and there was a bright flash, and when I could see, I was looking at the last demon deity. The god of Sax was surely the final creation of a dying race, Master Lee later told me, surely the clearest statement of what it means to lose an entire civilization. It's a shapeless bag, that's all. Its father was chaos, and its mother was nothingness, and it has no reason for existence, no beginning, no end. The great cavalier I had known as Yen Chi reached out and tenderly embraced his brother, and the bag opened for him, and then they lifted into the air and fluttered like a blind moth, flapping this way and that, envy and anarchy, aimless and inseparable, flying away to find nothing in nowhere. The Yang boat and crew had vanished. The Yin boat I stood on seemed to be becoming translucent, but somehow I wasn't afraid of melting away. I left the oar and walked past the resting rowers to Master Li. "Look, Ox," he said softly. The mist ahead of us was breaking up, and we were floating gently forward, and then nudging to a stop at a long grey dock, and the ghosts were waiting for us. The dead were in a festive mood as they climbed on board. They seemed to take up no space, no matter how many walked up the gangplank that gliding, sliding one and bounding and rushing slid out. And I somehow understood that my job was done, and so was Master Li's, and from now on the experienced crew would take over. The dock finally emptied, the lead oarsman shoved off, and the boat began moving forward again, into mist. I was standing with Master Li on the high prow, and I could look back over the stern past my steering oar and see ghosts leaning out over the water, beckoning and calling. I turned to Master Li with questions in my eyes. "The dead are trying to coax lung dragons to follow the boat and bring rain," he said quietly. "You see, Ox, it's a pact made long ago. At the Festival of Graves, we bring summer clothes and food and wine to the dead, and clean the graves and make them comfortable. At the Hungry Ghost Festival, we feed spirits too unfortunate to have family to care for them, and we pray for their souls. At the Festival of All Souls, we bring the dead paper money, so they can redeem their winter clothes from the pawn shops of the Land of Shadows. And we bring new clothes when necessary, and supplies of everything they might need for the winter. In return, the ghosts help bring rain, and fight disease and illness, which no longer have any power over them." We had passed through the mist, and were gliding out on North Lake. Fear had kept the crowds from the banks, but the old woman called Niao Tong, chamber pot, and the old man called Ye Lai Sang, incense which comes by night, meaning the smell when he removed his sandals, were not going to be denied a ritual they'd performed since they were children, and they painfully hobbled to the water's edge. Puzzlement was apparent in their gestures as they shaded their eyes and looked at us, and then right through us. The authorities had said there would be no boat race this year, but instinct told the two tottering wrecks that there was indeed a boat race, and they nodded firmly to each other and placed their little paper Songwen boats in the water. The boats carried the diseases their families might encounter during the next 6 months, and incense which comes by night tossed a pocketful of tiny dogs made of clay as well. The dogs would bite any diseases that slipped out of the paper boats and keep them from swimming back on shore. Paper boats are drawn in the wake of racing ones, and the ghosts were calling and beckoning, and the little bobbing things drifted out and turned obediently to follow the gentle rippling trail behind us. The boat was vibrating like a tuning fork. On the shore I saw buildings shake and loose tiles fall. The great U was sounding the final notes to announce the precise second of the solstice, and a gauzy, graceful waterspout was lifting into the air on the port side, higher and higher, spreading dragon wings, forming a cloud. Another dragon followed, and another, and they turned on the dirty fingers of yellow wind and began chasing them back into Mongolia. Clouds were spreading across half the sky, just in time to catch the light of the setting sun, and rain began to fall. And a cool, fresh breeze washed the city, and people began pouring out, running to the water, carrying their families' paper boats. Ox! I turned and cried out as 2 ghosts came through the crowd of the dead. My mother embraced me, and my father smiled and twisted his hands together, awkwardly. Hundreds of ghosts were greeting Master Li. A huge flotilla of disease boats was following us now, bobbing up and down over gentle waves, glowing in the sunset, and when I looked up from my parents I saw some kind of dark barrier, like a wall of low fog, with a shining open archway in the center, and the water that led into it was woven from the colors of the sky. "But, Mother, Peking really isn't all that much different from the village," I said. "You shouldn't believe all the alarming things you hear." The ghosts around Master Li had stepped back, bowing to the deck, and the sage was walking forward with a big smile of greeting on his face, and 8 hooded gentlemen closed around him, and I could see hands lift and gesture in an animated conversation. I laughed and pointed. "Look, that's Master Li," I said. "How could I possibly get into trouble working for a sweet little old man like that?" The boat glided silently through the glittering arch. Ahead was the great looming shape of the Zhou tree, where the goddess Kan Shui would catch the sun and bathe it and send it down the underground stream to the other side of the world, so it could climb branches of the Fu Sang tree and again reach the sky. The flowers of the Zhou tree were beginning to open and form the first stars of night, and the water around us was gloriously woven from the glow of sunset. "Ox!" cried Master Li. "Bring your esteemed parents, and come say hello to some friends of ours." "Yes, sir," I said. About the author. Barry Hughart is the highly acclaimed author of Bridge of Birds, which won the World Fantasy Award, and The Story of the Stone. He lives and works in Tucson, Arizona. The end of 8 Skilled Gentlemen, a novel.